Alrighty. So a lot of things I'm going to talk about today. I want to do this as a sort of introduction to the sessions that I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks. So first I'll talk about what I'm going to be doing the next couple of weeks, and you'll see how some of this stuff starts to fit in. Where? Oh, you touched it. So a couple of things. One of the things that I notice is a need for a system that allows people to look at all of the different layers of our experience and be able to help people with the healing processes that they're in. And so we have practitioners who work on movement. And so they're working on the external body from the outside inward. And then you have other people who do energy work, but they're just working on that one layer of energy. And then you have other people who might do massage work, who do lymphatic work or organ release or any of these kinds of things. And then you have another group of people who do color puncture. And one of the things that I've seen is missing is an understanding of how all of these different systems weave together in terms of someone's childhood experience and the traumas that they've had and the learning algorithms and programs that they've experienced through all the different layers of their upbringing, so to speak. So why don't we not do that? Because you keep advancing my screen. That's more distracting. So, so basically what I was seeing is people are attacking one layer without understanding that if you only do one layer, you're not taking that layer into the context of how that layer fits into everything else that we experience. So what I wanted to do was build a roadmap for how to work with people who show up in certain capacities. So like I said, a lot of what I teach in these sessions is geared towards my coaches and towards the people who are here as those thought leaders and healers and that sort of aspect. And so I present a lot of my information with that in mind, but you guys can still take a lot of that and apply it to your own lives in that sense. And so what I wanted to do, what I wanted to do was be able to give you a system that allows you to say, okay, somebody came in with this emotional state or this physical symptom. So somebody's having pain in their right rib area, and they're having, with a certain type of questioning, you might find that they have anxiety, or they have this type of emotion that shows up reoccurring in their life. Maybe it's subtle, maybe it's a macro anxiety that they're aware of. And you can start to pair the emotional state with how that communicates with your cellular consciousness and how that underlying belief influences the emotional state, and then how the belief creates an electromagnetic reality for your cellular consciousness to form into a gestalt consciousness that forms your organs. Then we want to understand the different layers of how those things manifest in the body. And so we can start to use the understanding of the emotion, the understanding of the beliefs and programs, which I'm going to talk about today. And you'll be able to take things like the visceral body work for that specific organ, the lymph work that ties to that specific organ, and the understanding of embryology and prenatal patterns to really see how those programs formed, so that you can start to give your client a bigger framework for shifting their experience of reality. And so when we have a lot of different early life programs that show up in our relationships, in our careers, in the way that we make money, all of the ways that our experiences show up have tendrils in our belief structure. And so what I'm going to be doing over the next couple of weeks is going kind of organ for organ and taking the beliefs tied to that organ system or that area of the body, teaching how to do release work with it, teaching how to reframe and balance the different types of beliefs that show up in that particular area, as well as the lymphatic connection, the different multidimensional layers of the physiology that play into how that organ functions and how you actually express yourself into the world based on those programs. We'll then use color puncture. We'll then give you this whole multi-layered system that you can use to say, okay, somebody's having a lot of worry, or somebody's having stomach issues. And how do we use color puncture? How do we use visceral organ work? How do we use the active reframing programs to be able to help empower that client to heal themselves? Because one of the things we want to realize is it's never me who's doing the healing. It's never you who's doing the healing. It's you providing an energy to the client so that they can heal themselves. And one of the most fundamental underlying aspects on whether that works has to do with our underlying programs and our underlying belief structure about how those interactions actually work, as well as our understanding and awareness and examination of the other tendrils and layers within which those exist. So I'm going to start today with the idea of best choice. So one of the things we often are conflicted with is when we are making choices that change outcomes in our life, that might lead us down a different path, that might even be as simple as, what do I eat tonight? One of the things that we often have a lot of internal conflict about is, which choice should I make? Which is the best choice for me? And when we look at what is our best choice, there's a lot of different sub-beliefs that tie into what we believe is best. And so when we begin to examine that kind of structure and we look at, okay, best choice, let's say we're debating about, should I stay in my current career or should I leave my career for something else? And you're debating, what is the best choice right now? At the most simple level, you can say, well, I realize that any choice I make is going to be the best choice because it's the one that I made and it's what brings me here. However, that doesn't give us quite enough depth and nuance to actually be able to navigate why that discrepancy in our choice making is showing up. Why do we doubt whether the choice we're going to make is going to be the most empowering to us? So what that means is when we look at best choice, immediately what happens is we get an oppositional belief that is born out of that idea. So we have a concept of what best is, and then at the same time, we have a concept of what worst is. And what ends up happening, especially with New Age teachings and a lot of these things, is they encourage people, well, focus on only the best choice and ignore the worst choice. Ignore those bad scenarios, because if you look at the bad scenarios, you're going to be creating them. And there's a lot of disempowerment when we become afraid of our own consciousness, when we become afraid of how these systems work, and therefore avoid analyzing the subsystems that are tied to them. So when we look at best choice, we want to start by understanding, how do we define these beliefs? How do we start to track it? So we can ask ourselves, okay, we're trying to figure out what is the best choice right now. And that's an energetic sensation, right? Because we are making choices all the time. We're deciding between left and right all the time. And some of those choices to us hold more weight than others. And as those choices come up, it's easiest to detect this when we have what we feel is a larger choice, but this exists at every single level, from the most subtle choice to the most macroscopic choice. And what we want to say is, okay, what is our definition of best? What does that mean to us? What does best result in? And what is our belief around what that translates to? Do we say, okay, our best choice is the one that leads us to our easiest life? Is our best choice the one that leads us to the most growth? Is our best choice the one that leads us to the strongest catalyst or the best learning experience? Is our best choice the one that makes us the most money? Is our best choice the one that leads us to our purpose? And so when we start to look at the subtext of some of those different lines, and we start to say, okay, which one of those for this particular scenario is the the anchor point of what I'm looking at. So let's look at the fact that, okay, my best choice is the one that makes me the most money, right? If you're trying to sell a product, if you're trying to get a client, you're trying to make the choices that create the best money, because you believe that the most money out of your system is going to lead to maybe you believe that eventually, if you make enough money, you'll be able to rest, right? And so part of that game is understanding, where does that best choice lead you? Because at the same time, we have a direction or trajectory that is built out of our belief in what that best choice is. And we also have several sub trajectories that are connected to that overall belief that we really want to understand, so that we can start to really have a lot more clarity in the nuance of the lessons that our inner being and our higher intelligence is trying to create through us. Because part of the game here is an experience of learning to hold higher amounts of consciousness, larger amounts of frequency and awareness, and become more effective at controlling our reality. And there are a lot more variables and probabilities that exist that are kept unconscious until we have the skill of navigating them enough to bring more data to the surface to be able to consciously create with. And so when we look at money as our trajectory, just trying to keep it simple so that you guys can start at least with one direction for it, and we're making choices based on money, well, immediately we have the opposite belief that is created. The worst choice leads to less money or no money, right? We always want to go to the extreme of that belief, meaning, okay, if I make the best choice, I live in heaven, and if I make the worst choice, I live in hell. And the inner debate and turmoil that happens energetically with us is giving us a sign that we hold conflicting beliefs that we haven't examined yet. So when we look at the worst choice and where that leads, we start to say, okay, well, I believe on the subconscious and the lower levels, like, worst choice leads to a harder outcome and a larger challenge that doesn't give me the sensations and feelings that I want. It leads me to losing money. What happens when I lose money? Well, if I lose money, then I struggle to pay rent and I have the stresses of that. Or if I lose money, then eventually maybe I end up alone and my partner leaves me and I have to figure things out. And then you have this whole narrative story that exists that gives you an idea of what the belief is, which then gives you an opportunity to say, well, is that actually true? If I was to actually make that choice, would I be on the street and homeless the minute that I made that choice? Very unlikely, right? Because these choices are not instantaneous at any time. All of these different ideas and choices are always structured pieces of consciousness that exist in a future reality that we effectively line up with by pouring energy into it. And so when we look at that that choice debate, and we look at the worst choice, we're always basing it usually on an amorphous concept on what is best and what is worst. And through the examination of really the definition of what worst means to us, we can start to say, okay, well, I'm not going to end up on the street realistically tomorrow. It'll actually be 2 months or 3 months or 1 month or 6 months before that would actually happen. And between there, I will gain more information. I will have more opportunities to shift directions and make more choices. This is not the last choice I will ever make, right? And so when we look at making the best choice in every scenario, a lot of times we also hold the belief that every choice we make is the last choice we will ever make. And so we have to also reframe the underlying beliefs that are tied to that, so that when we make a belief, we realize, wait, this is not the last choice I'm ever going to make. And I realize that I've made choices before that led me in different directions. And the goal is not to make the best choices. The goal is to step into more information. And as we step into more information, in whatever direction that goes, we have more information from which to make more empowered choices and reframe the underlying beliefs that cause us to maybe not make as empowered a result as we want. So part of the game is that our conscious mind is constantly perceiving and translating reality and making choices and doing these things. And our higher self and our inner reality is giving that structure and creating it based on those underlying beliefs. And so if you think of these belief structures as both the positive conscious one that you have, as well as the unconscious negative aspect of that positive belief, you can realize that it's a thermostat that we balance within that framework. And our work in where that empowerment comes from is in examining the fact that hot and cold are not opposites, but spectrums along the same temperature line. And so all of our beliefs are not necessarily opposites, but spectrums. And so we can begin to shift how much energy we're pouring on the entire spectrum, because on this planet, on this body, we can have multiple spectrums of temperature that can exist simultaneously. Now, if we have conflicting energy realities that exist within us because of the conflicting beliefs that we have, we're going to end up having a mismatch in the direction that energy can flow through us. And we're going to have distortions in what shows up as feedback mechanisms from our reality. And so those feedback mechanisms that are coming back in the form of relationship conflict, or, I thought I was asking for it to show up this way, and I end up having the opposite result. Well, all of that feedback is leading us back to our own personal accountability to understand the nuance of energies that we are outputting, right? If that shows up in our life, if that relationship conflict shows up in our life, or we're desiring something from our partner and our partner isn't showing up in the way that we want, or our parent isn't showing up in the way that we want, it's always leading us to elements where we are outputting conflicting energy realities within us, or beliefs or desires about what we are worthy to receive. And so part of that game is, like I said, defining these beliefs. So we always are conscious of our top level beliefs, and the top level beliefs can be used to drip down to the other more subtle beliefs that we hold that are always connected to those top level beliefs. A lot of the time we hold a belief that our subconscious is not accessible to us. Or we hold the belief that some of our beliefs are just not available to us until such and such a time. And the truth is, or the higher truth is, that all of these things are available to us at any given time. But if we believe that they're not available, they will not be available to us. And if we see how these beliefs are that powerful, they become a self-fulfilling prophecy depending on what belief structure we hold. Because these belief structures literally create crystalline structures and electromagnetic realities within our light body, within our physiology, that is going to literally change the translation of energy through us, and thus the resulting emotional output through us. And it'll also then change the structure of the cellular data that exists as our physical body. So we literally live in the body of our beliefs. So if we believe that our body, if we believe in illness, we have also a belief in health. And along that spectrum, we end up creating certain beliefs in how that health or how that illness should manifest. And when we hold those types of beliefs, we create self-fulfilling prophecies based on our worthiness, based on the beliefs on how these things should repair, how these things should unfold. And then we experience that as our reality. And so when the collective holds previously agreed upon beliefs, you end up having to process your belief structures and reframes in the context of the greater consciousness belief structure, which eventually you can kind of distance yourself from little by little. But we have to be aware of what the collective tends to hold as a belief, and why the reality tends to manifest in the way that it does, even though you personally might have started to shift some of those beliefs in terms of greater empowerment. So one of the most fundamental beliefs that we tend to hold is an idea of good versus evil. or good and evil. And the very belief in good and evil starts to imply that there is a good path or a right path and a wrong path. And the very belief in right versus wrong is going to color how you perceive the instruction sets and the informations that are coming from your higher self through you into your ability to express. And so when we look at what right and wrong, a lot of times it becomes an inner debate on what would be the tying it back into what is the best choice, or what is the choice that's going to keep me safe? What is the choice that's going to make me healthy? And what is the choice that will bring me money? And when we start to look at that, we can start to see the tendrils of, okay, so if it's a right choice, it leads to, I have a belief that the right choices make my life easier and the wrong choices make my life harder. And then you have another layer of belief that says, well, what is what is easier? What is harder? And so a lot of times what happens is we believe, okay, well, if I could just rest, if I could like just catch up, if I could get enough of this stuff done, if I could activate enough of my DNA, if I could just be healthy enough, then I can have a little bit of rest, and then I can come back and I can do the next step of things that I'm here to do, that I could serve my purpose. And what that does is that creates that belief of you waiting for that next layer of rescue, instead of you understanding the underlying beliefs in your empowerment and your disempowerment that actually causes you to hesitate in your expression. So when we look at right and wrong and good and evil and the potential paths that those can lead on, we want to understand that these are all collectively held beliefs that we have adopted and that we live on because usually out of some subtle fear that we're still operating on, because we believe that if we are misaligned with our safe path, that we are going to end up in an undesirable location where we're feeling disconnected. And so one of the things that I'll kind of tie this in a little bit, is that our higher self, our inner self, our other layers of multidimensional anatomy, there's always this subtext that there are times where we are disconnected from it. And people use psychedelics, people use other types of drugs, people use meditation, people use plant medicines, they use different techniques so that they can feel connected, because they hold the belief that there are times where they are more or less connected, or times where they are actually disconnected, and that helps them feel what they perceive to be or what they believe to be that connection. And so one of the most important beliefs that we can really understand is that if you believe there's a time that you are disconnected, you will experience times where you feel disconnected, because your belief generates the emotional pattern that manifests as the feeling of disconnection. And so if we can start to understand, okay, I have a belief that I hold, and I'm seeing it just in these certain behaviors, like, well, maybe you go to do maybe you microdose, or maybe you smoke cannabis, or any of these different things that you might use to get downloads. And you feel like, okay, I get downloads when I do those. That means when I get downloads, I'm connected. And you associate those kinds of things that reinforce the belief that you hold, that sometimes you're disconnected, or sometimes you're not worthy enough, or high frequency enough, or whatever enough to connect to those aspects of yourself that are always present. And so there are a lot of layers of distortion that exist, especially on the planet right now, with like phantom matrix timelines and distortions in terms of possession. And the thing that we really want to understand is that these are always aspects that our higher intelligence create because our conscious mind focuses on it. And so they're always still our personal responsibility. When we feel that we are the victim of our circumstance, our higher intelligence is simply there to reinforce the fact that we hold that underlying belief, because it's our work then to recognize how those things are a completed circuit that will unfold as we gain more information, as we express more information, right? If you have a worry about whether you're going to be prepared for your class that you're teaching today, and you're doubting it, and you're searching for things to fill the gap because you don't trust that you're going to have the information that you need when that time comes, well, you're going to start to recognize that that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Whereas you are always pushed then to shift the belief. But the thing we want to understand is that when we start to shift our belief, the opposite belief still exists and will still continue to outpicture in our reality. And so a lot of times what happens is we're like, okay, I'm going to give myself affirmations, even though you know that part of you knows that you're lying to yourself. And you're going to give yourself affirmations and you're going to lie to yourself until you believe it. And your consciousness then carries back to you both the old experience and the new one as a way of mirroring back to you the subtle distortions in that belief that still need refinement. So one of the things that I am personally processing with these chats in general. So one of the things that is a thing that I've been kind of balancing and working through is, people hired me for coaching. People hired me for subscribe to the archives of these chats. And now I'm offering these chats for free. And suddenly there's a belief that exists that if these become free, well, then people will just watch the free session and won't subscribe to the archive. And so if I hold that belief, what ends up happening is that belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. That if I believe that, okay, I'm offering this stuff for free, but I also want to be financially supported by offering this stuff for free, then the universe is going to show me where the distortions in my belief structure are, that I have both the belief that, okay, I can offer this for free and that'll encourage people to subscribe. And I trust that that absolutely is going to work because other elements in my experience have proven that. At the same time, I have other elements in my experience that have said, well, that's a risk, or, maybe you shouldn't do it that way. And so you start to see how the pairing of both of those can potentially show up in the way that it's mirrored back to you through my clients, through my own personal thought processes around what is showing up here. And so part of that game is to recognize I have the choice on how I want to align that belief. So if I have this belief that I'm going to share this stuff for free, and there's the negative side of that belief that says, well, if I share all this stuff for free, I will not be financially supported. And if I'm not financially supported, I'll run out of money. And then there's the other added layers of everything that's going on politically and in the external reality at this point. And so you take in all those things in context and recognize, okay, there's a belief that, okay, nobody's going to sign up and it's only been 1 week. And so you have to kind of put it into the time perspective of it. You're like, okay, well, if nobody signs up, how long do I have if nobody's signing up to make new choices, to adjust course, to change my way of communicating so that I can shift my beliefs so that this does work and it does become effective. And the way that happens is it gives me an opportunity when I first release this to see my old beliefs that no longer that don't support the energy with which I want to express. And so they show up in opposition, and I can say, okay, I see these oppositional ideas. I can see these oppositional perceptions of what is happening right now. Now I can take that and say, well, is this something I can actually trust for longer? And this is a part of me that's still holding on to the old aspect of how I've expressed. And can I then give myself more time on the positive side by pouring faith, by reframing these beliefs into greater empowerment so that I can start to say, well, okay, I'm not going to be homeless tomorrow, or okay, I'm not going to run out of money tomorrow. I'm not going to run out of money after such and such a time. And so I know that I have this window to expand within. I know I have this window to continue to chisel away at the negative aspect of those beliefs. And as I give myself permission to shift that, as I give myself permission to have that wider window, it gives me an opportunity to have that breathing room that literally allows that distant temperature gradient of those conflicting beliefs to begin to shift just enough that I get more positive reinforcement. And that positive reinforcement starts to build momentum, right? And so we have to recognize that when we're shifting our underlying programs, when we are working on healing certain underlying wounds around our worthiness, we're going to be confronted with all the ways that we still feel unworthy, right? And so that is a really important gift that we have been taught to be afraid of, that we're being taught to be positive at all costs, to focus on the positive aspects of what we're trying to create, feel the good emotions, all these different things, while telling us, well, don't pour energy into the negative side. Don't look at the negative side, because if you look at that, you're going to create the negative side of it. But what's really happening is that negative side and positive side are being created simultaneously. And it's our work to change our point of focus by defining that negative side and analyzing the truth of our conscious experience, what we consciously are going to choose to believe about what our child self has perceived around these negative aspects of belief, so that we can start to carry that into the positive side without turning blinders to the negative side of things that we don't want to look at. And so when we look at the way that I structure a lot of these things, there's other layers of what I want to be able to offer this through, because even with doing these free sessions, I still feel on a very subtle level that I'm withholding information in different places, whether it's my Instagram, whether it's my Telegram, whether it's in the chats and the way that I present my archives. I still feel like because I have all this stuff that I really want to teach and I really want to share people, but I also have this financial aspect of where I need to be supported, I have to make sure that some of it is hidden behind a paywall. And so there's another layer of belief that says, well, if I open everything up publicly for free, how can I be supported in that? Well, then it takes me down the line of, okay, well, I could teach all this stuff and open it up and then take donations. I can have almost like a ministry, so to speak. And so there's a completely different belief structure that needs to be built around what will actually allow me to be successful in any of these other trajectories that I could potentially go on. And so then I can realize, okay, well, if I can share everything, what happens if I open all of this stuff up to everybody being able to go through my teachings, everybody being able to level themselves up? Well, then there's other beliefs about, well, I had just promised my clients that I was going to give them affiliate links to be able to bring people in. What are they going to think about these things? And so I have to navigate what my beliefs are around that, because they will only be mirrors of my own energy back to me about how I am expressing through that. And so there's a lot of nuance and subtlety that starts to show up through how I can shift these beliefs and how that can start to give me greater control and empowerment of how my life is going to show up through me and for me. And that is not something that I can necessarily pre-predict, right? So I can start by saying, this is the desire that I want. I can start by offering these sessions for free and asking for whether it's donations or whatever other thing comes up, or it's sales of other products that I sell that support this, and allowing this to open up and just understanding how those energy exchanges work, and begin to just tilt my balance towards that direction and practice re-energizing those beliefs, while every time I have thoughts that come up to me that say, well, you should doubt this, well, that's leading me to other tendrils of beliefs that I'm holding, and fears that I'm holding, and subtle and nuanced experiences that I'm holding, that I can then start to reframe and push so that I can be successful in creating the atmosphere and the experience that I want to have for myself, that I want to have for you guys, and being able to open those doors in that sense. So what ends up happening is every step of the way, we are being presented with more and more nuanced learning algorithms that allow us to balance those underlying energy generation systems or electromagnetic realities or structures that exist within us that create our outpictured reality, not just based on our conscious thoughts, but based on the layers of conscious thoughts that lead us to the unconscious thoughts that lead us to the underlying belief structures that lead us to the programs that we run. And all of that can start to need some water. All of that can start to kind of lead us down a rabbit hole of self-awareness that begins to show us the spectrums and polarities that we live on. Because what ends up happening is if we judge the negative aspects of us, if we judge our negative desires, if we judge the negative beliefs that we hold by saying, I'm going to only focus on the positive, we're automatically imprinting a fear of the negative. So that when the negative comes up, we become afraid to even look at it. When we have a scary thought come up, we become afraid to even look at what that is. And a lot of that ties into whether that's our religious upbringing or that's our the things that we learned from our parents' behavior, the things that we learned through the traumas that we had growing up. And so it's always our work to hold personal responsibility and self-containment for our energies, recognizing, okay, if this relationship dynamic is coming up, if this feeling is coming up, if this struggle is coming up, if this blessing is coming up, these are all our own responsibility to navigate energetically and pay attention to our own conscious thoughts to begin with, to say, how am I talking to myself? What am I feeling in connection to how I'm talking to myself? What words am I using? Do those words lead me to a subtler narrative that I can trace so that I can become more empowered with the things that I want? If I'm not getting the relationship dynamics that I want, that's my responsibility to find the programs that I'm running and the beliefs that I have about how that's supposed to run, as well as the oppositional beliefs that I also hold that are causing that to run in distortion. If I am, so all of this is always coming back to paying attention to what you want and what you think about what you want. So if I want a thing or I want an experience or I'm judging the experience I'm currently having, it's implying that I want a certain type of experience to show up. And so all of these are giving us breadcrumbs that we can use to start to see what energies am I outputting that are causing me to aim my energy in a place that is causing the thing I want not to show up. Right? So what happens is on this level, in this physical reality, we have one point of focus. But outside of this reality, we have other teams or aspects of our consciousness whose only mission is to fulfill our conscious mind's endeavors in this reality. And so part of that game is we have our control of our conscious mind and our memories and our experiences and all of these things. And we become more and more progressively aware of how those energies manifest and what those beliefs are. And then we have teams of our aspects of consciousness whose only job is to fulfill that based on that belief, based on that trauma, based on that structure, so that you're constantly getting energetic and reality feedback of what those structures actually look like based on you. And so if we are constantly holding oppositional beliefs in terms of maybe what illness and health are, and the doctors we keep going to sell us a belief in illness rather than a belief in health or in a belief in how our body can actually generate that health. Well, we have to think of ourselves in a similar way to us with our higher guidance. Our cells each have individuated consciousness, and our cells' individuated consciousness is going to be doing a couple of different things. When we have belief structures, when we have energy structures, when we have desires or beliefs about how our body is functioning, that creates a energetic blueprint around how those cells are going to be living their lives. And those cells live anywhere from a couple of days to 7-10 years, right? And so those cells over the course of their lifetime, they are constantly reincarnating. They're constantly reincarnating. And as they reincarnate, they're taking their cellular memory and they're reincarnating with their cellular memory every time, bringing their cellular memory with them, bringing the beliefs that they held previously with them. And so you are constantly being regenerated in your tissues based on the energy of your beliefs that you're holding. And so if you are constantly regenerating based on a belief in illness, based on a belief in unworthiness, based on an injury, based on a trauma, your cells are literally replenishing themselves in the electromagnetic framework that says reality is this illness. And so that continues to manifest in your physical body, in the emotions that you experience, in the physiological pains that you experience. So when we start to use color puncture, we're literally changing that electromagnetic blueprint that stands around those cells and determines how do those cells communicate? How do those cells live their lives so that when they reincarnate, what memories are they reincarnating with? What experiences are they reincarnating with? What are we clearing from ourselves from the standpoint of shifting our beliefs, from using color puncture to shift those underlying imprints so that we can actually change how those cells generate reality and then how our physical body manifests. Because our body is not disconnected from our soul. It's not disconnected from our inner self. It is our inner self in density. And so all of these layers, there's not a separation. There's not a separation from our soul. There's not a separation from our inner self. It is literally the animating principle. And so all of these things at every level have their own layers of consciousness that are constantly co-creating, that are constantly communicating with each other in both directions. And so that's why when we die, our cells live after the soul has moved on to other dimensions of reality. When it's shifted its angular momentum of particle spin and it begins to look at other dimensions of reality and other formats of form and different probability fields that it starts to align with, our cells continue to have their reincarnation until such a time that the animating principle that has been powering our bodies or powering and regenerating those cells runs out of batteries, and its frequency just diminishes until other things sprout out of it and consume it, and it continues that circle of life, so to speak. And so it's important to recognize all the different layers of animating principle that are constantly co-creating through the structure of your beliefs, which are informed by your traumas and programs and psychological imprints and miasms and all of these different structures that influence how we hold those beliefs and what we're afraid of looking at, so that we can start to shift how those beliefs are structured and what they are and what we think things should show up as and how we think our parents should behave when we talk to them, or how we think our girlfriend should behave when we're discussing something, or how they should nurture you, or all of these different things are based on programs that are imprinted when we're younger or during prenatal times. And so all of those different programs that get imprinted are engineered and chosen by us because they allow us to have a template and a framework of experience that allows us then to shed those layers. Because if we had just shown up without a template of experience, there would just be too many variables that were shooting off in every single direction, and we wouldn't be able to bring our consciousness into focus. And so we use these traumas and we use these lessons to literally teach us how to control our consciousness at a greater level, so that over time, as we peel that layer, we have a new layer of expression that we can step into, a new layer of creativity, a new layer of awareness, a new layer of control of how our reality communicates with us and through us. And so we learn those lessons, we expand a little bit, and then we, at that next level, we get new layers of nuance, we get new layers of information. We have to hold more multidimensional information simultaneously. It's not about just gaining information, and thinking that we need this information in order to express who we are. Everything that we need to be the fullest expression of ourself is within us from day one, is embedded in the frequency that is available to us from day one. The thing that inhibits that are the programs and the beliefs and the structures that are created in early life that alter how that flows through us as a mechanism of teaching us how to navigate it. as a mechanism of teaching us how to navigate the interdependent relationships that we really want, as a mechanism of teaching us how to create the experience that we want. And so we then start to expand into those greater levels of conscious reality so that we can more effectively determine what are these beliefs that are inhibiting my ability of showing up. When I say I should be showing up this way, or I should be, or maybe I need to learn more, I need another certification, or I need to use this other technique to allow me to be effective with my clients, or I need to just keep learning through some of these other teachers, because these other teachers have this information. And if I just study it a little bit more and I understand it just that much more, and I gather that much more information, then I'm going to be able to show up. Then I'm going to know the thing I need to know in order to be who I'm supposed to be. And so we can very accurately through that look at the different beliefs that we hold about how we gather information, what we believe that information serves in terms of actually empowering us to realize the connection that we always have, and begin practicing embodying that connection so that we can keep integrating the fragments of our conscious mind that we've created through the traumas that we've experienced. And so when we have all these traumas and we've gone through all these different systems that have created these little subtle personality fragments that create both the negative oppositional beliefs and the positive ones, we can start to integrate those together by actually just doing examination work. And that's part of what makes color puncture so powerful, is its ability to bring unconscious, subconscious things that are fundamental programs that we interact on to the surface, so that we can start to say, oh, I was holding that belief that my mom should nurture me in this way, that because she's not nurturing me in that way, she's the bad guy, and her reality is wrong and my reality is right, and if she just saw my reality, she'd be more empowered. And so you start to want to then go rescue people. You're like, well, I'm waking up and I'm feeling more empowered and I'm shifting these things. You guys should see the same things I do. Not realizing that every layer of this game, the beliefs that people hold are their reality. If somebody holds that the sky is yellow, then you can fight all day long trying to convince them that the sky is blue, or you can see them in the beliefs that they hold. They believe that the sky is yellow, and it is okay for them to hold that belief. And so once you start to see them in their belief, we can start to see what is the desire that they hold behind that belief? Do they hold that belief that wearing a mask is protecting people because they actually believe that a mask is protecting people? Or do they have this underlying belief in and a desire for safety? And so they're looking at all of these other nuances, and they're looking for safety, and they're looking for a feeling of security. And so many things are wobbling in their life. And so can you start to see these people who are doing things that, from if you're outside of this game looking in, you can see, why are these people even falling for this charade? Or you can say, you know what, I see why these people are actually playing along with this charade, because they have beliefs that have been structured from their whole life, and that is their reality, which is why when so many people come, they come from this outside place and they're trying to say, oh, you don't need to do that. That's dumb because here's facts. Well, facts are just fictions that have taken solid form. And so if we can recognize that data points and facts are only a reality we experience because you have chosen to adopt those facts as true, and you can see how you seek information because you're seeking facts to give you a definition of something that you are actually supposed to define for yourself, you can begin to shift how you perceive that different data. You can start to shift how you experience what nutrition means for you, what your body image is, what your belief around what health should look like, and how you should be showing up. And all of these different shoulds that start to come to the surface as you navigate the desires that you hold, and begin reframing those so that you are as powerful as you can be in all of the different interactions that you're going to have, by recognizing that you've adopted facts that may not be the most empowering way for you to create your reality. And so I've noticed a lot of these things in nutrition. I've noticed a lot of these things in the idea of making the best choice, in the idea of I should be more appreciative, right? And so we have a belief when we say I should be more appreciative that being more appreciative creates some kind of result that we don't currently have, that if we aren't appreciative, it creates a different result. And so how can we start to track the shoulds that we think we should be, not because a should is wrong innately, because all of those are right, because they're leading us to aspects of ourself that we hold in conflict. And so that we judge who we are now based on a framework of who we think we should be and project ourselves into those distorted energy patterns. Okay. Let me pause for a second and see if you guys have any of my coaching clients. So this is for my coaching clients only. I know some of you guys are new. So if my coaching clients have had a lot of stuff coming up this week, I know that some of the stuff will weave into that. So what questions do my coaching clients have about the stuff that I brought up, or stuff that even if it's unrelated, if stuff has been coming up this week that you want to navigate, go ahead and ask, and we'll dig into that a little bit now too.
I just wanted to kind of contextualize this a little bit and actually build off of something I mentioned last week. A lot of this can seem really cerebral, all this, tracking of the patterns and all this nuance and trying to track our consciousness and where our beliefs lie and everything. And I'll focus on what was a big thing for me this year, and something I mentioned last week was I used to feel that I was unworthy of my own love, and I learned how to love myself and that I was worthy of my own love and all the reasons why that was the case. And I shifted a ton of things, really started to take care of myself, take time for myself, embrace living my life for myself instead of just getting through it. Practicing color puncture, doing endocrine, understanding, why I used to not love myself and how that outpictured in my reality. And I was feeling great. And then because these things are so crystallized, and because that scale exists in its infinite subtlety, and like you said, we're creating all of it simultaneously, the positive and the negative. So I had shifted that belief. I consciously thought I'm worthy of love now. I know that, and that was my conscious thought. I would slip back into patterns where I wasn't showing that love for myself. So I would not take time to I would not take time for myself. I maybe stopped doing some of the color puncture work. I stopped exercising and moving as much because I was like, I got this. I love myself. That's great. But I think a really important aspect of it that I'm starting to learn is that in order to really crystallize the changes that we want to make and really go through that repatterning, we actually have to take that into action. So I was taking actions that showed myself that I loved myself. I was embodying that self-love, and then I started slipping on those things, or because I had thought that I had made some kind of progress and that I didn't need to be aware of this anymore. I had stopped acting in that way, and slowly you have those negative aspects that then start to show up, or different things on the spectrum that start to show up. And so, and this is applied in a lot of things lately, where I've realized that um, in order to shift the things on that spectrum, I have to be really aware of when I understand my belief, when I understand what's a more empowering belief, and even understand, even connecting to some of the subconscious feelings that I have on it. The way that I'm able to shift out of those things is by changing my actions, even just the things that I say to friends and coworkers and and family, to the things that the way that I'm managing and spending my time, uh, and even the way that you're creating your own inner dialogue too. It really requires those actions to crystallize these things, and also those actions are required for all of the feedback in order to keep aware of that spectrum and where we're progressing and shifting energy into along it. So it's not it you know it, I've found I haven't been able to just cerebrally go through these processes without really, you know, making decisions, taking action, and then noticing how I'm able to embody those different choices that I'm making. uh,
So so one of the things that is really important to note is this idea of action, because we are always taking action. Whether you consider action sitting down versus running is a matter of just your definition of what you believe action is. And the key thing that Scott is talking about here is changed action, new action, different action. So all of our thoughts are an action. And so if we uh, just do things that bring information to the surface, and we do color that brings all this stuff to the surface, or we do psychedelics and bring all this stuff up to the surface, but we're not taking this information and making new choices, well, we haven't put an output into something that causes that circuit to flow properly. And so when we take that new action and that circuit starts to flow, that will show us where there's inhibitions in the new trajectory that we're trying to create. And so when I say gain more information, that literally comes from that change in energetic output, and that change in trajectory, and that change in where our point of focus is. And so the I made an analogy yesterday, which is kind of probably a good one to just see if I can remember it. So I was talking about a circuit with a light bulb. So with this particular circuit, it's not an accurate circuit, but it try and hold the image of it a little bit. So we have a circuit with a light bulb. We have a positive voltage, and we have a ground, and we have a negative voltage. And our ground is our Manau energy, our Gestalt energy, the collection of what the reference point for the positive and negative becomes that ground point. And so let's say the Gestalt energy that we currently hold is 1 gold coin, and we'll say that 1 energy unit or 1 gold coin. So when we start our circuit and the thing we want to create is illumination in the light bulb, or manifest the illumination of this light bulb. And we start by outputting 1 gold coin on the positive side, and that positive side is an output energy that lights the light bulb or causes it to flicker, and it illuminates just enough to then produce just a little bit more energy. So now we then have a receptive side that comes back on the negative, and that's coming back on the negative side in the form of, let's say, 10 gold coins. So now these 10 gold coins come back from that illuminated light bulb on the negative side and add to the ground, the Gestalt that we currently have. So now we have 11 gold coins. If we output all 11 of those gold coins, the illumination on the positive side, that illumination is going to be brighter in the bulb, and that 11 gold coins is going to turn into 100 gold coins, or 100 additional gold coins on the receiving end. And that hand turns into our Gestalt. And that can grow and multiply as we reinvest those energy outputs into what we're doing. However, if we output 1 gold coin, we get back 10, and we withhold the 10 coins we just got and only output 1 gold coin at the same level of energy that we always did. And then we get 10 back, and that adds 10, but we're only outputting 10. The thing we are trying to create, the illumination of the light bulb, is only going to still illuminate based on that 1 gold coin that we output. We're going to have this vast reservoir of energy that we're not even using and allowing to flow through us, because we're not actually adding to the output that we can send through that circuit. And so when we understand the feedback mechanisms that happen from and like I said, this is not an accurate analogy. I just want you to hold the visual on how these energy exchanges can start to happen, is where are you investing your energy? If you're trying to grow something and build something by delivering less energy or the same amount of energy with each of these exchanges, what are you putting into the universe in terms of your belief on how these things should work? And you can start to then see how your energy exchanges might be off balance by just kind of examining the idea behind how that circuit might work. Like I said, that's not an accurate circuit or really accurate in terms of how things go, but I wanted you to get an idea of the analogy that I'm putting together there. So when we talk about integration, the process of integration is multifaceted because there's different stages of integration that we're going to go through. When we first start the self-awareness process, really, we don't necessarily even need to worry about shifting beliefs. We don't need to worry about tracking all these things that are coming up. We just want to start gaining awareness of cause and effect and holding ourselves accountable to that, whether we know why it happened, whether we have a conscious awareness of why it happened, but just seeing these things are showing up and there's something I'm outputting there that's causing them to show up. And as you start to think that way, as you start to give yourself permission to take responsibility for how these things come up, you start to integrate your co-creative connection to how those things unfold. So part of the game of integration in this sense is to understand that every outcome, whether that's what we want or what we don't want, or it's good or bad, is always based on the energy we're outputting, and the good in the positive context of how everything unfolds is because it's always brought back to our own energy and our own belief structures and our own programs that we're running and our own areas of disempowerment for how we are expecting something outside of us to rescue us from what we're experiencing, something outside of us to change. And so somebody asked a good question that kind of works in here, which I don't normally want to answer, but it actually fits pretty well with this. So a lot of people consider traumas bad. And this is a belief that you hold, that traumas are bad. If you start to step back and understand that you chose all of those different traumas and experiences, not necessarily consciously on this part, but you have unconscious aspects of you that are constantly co-creating and fulfilling your conscious mind's focus. When we understand that we had a lot of these early life traumas and we had a lot of these imprints and we continue to live out our codependency patterns into our relationships, we understand that we had these, we chose and we co-created with our parents these particular traumas and experiences that allow us to have better discernment on our own energy, on our own responsibility with how those energies flow. As we start to recognize, okay, I had this trauma and this trauma wasn't done to me, it was done with me, because with me implies that I co-created this as a learning experience. And I understand that in each of these lives, I chose to develop certain aspects of my consciousness so that I could create a more whole gestalt of my consciousness on the other levels of experience that my higher self is co-creating within, in the other probability fields, and the next stages of consciousness expansion, where we have greater information throughput. We need to be able to control the different belief structures, the different electromagnetic realities within us, the different energies that we actually output. So that, and the only way to do that, the best way to teach us that, is to give us contrasting inputs from the beginning that are strong enough to get us to learn the lesson, to get us to see, wait, I have this belief that money is evil, and somebody else has a belief that it's a blessing and it's the best thing in the world. Well, whose belief is right? Neither one is right or wrong. They're both, you choose how you want to navigate what those beliefs mean to you. And if you have the belief that money is the root of all evil, and you have a belief then that evil is bad and evil sends you to a scary place, well, your belief structure is going to co-create that through you until you decide to change those fundamental beliefs and recognize that you had a role to play in co-creating them. That process is the integration process of you recognizing yourself in the way that your life is showing up, in the people that show up in your life, and you hold yourself accountable to saying, these particular responses that I'm getting from my reality, rather than checking out and running away and bypassing the work that your soul is bringing up for you, you actually say, okay, this person is treating me this way. And rather than me putting up a wall and blocking out the way that this person is treating me, I'm going to see, what am I supposed to be giving to myself here? What do I believe this interaction is supposed to be? And what is the opposite of that belief that I also just by default am going to be holding? And can I start to recognize if I'm wanting nurturing for my relationship, if I'm wanting someone to be willing to listen to the things that I'm saying, whether they believe in it or not, what is it that I don't do with my expression where I'm not willing to listen to these other perspectives? What do I do where where I'm not willing to listen to myself? If they're not willing to listen to me, then what is it that my energy or belief system is outputting that's causing them to show up in that capacity? Because it's always that co-creation within yourself that is expressed through the other mirrors of consciousness through you. So one of the things that happens, and this is also a good point, is that, a lot of times, and I a couple of weeks ago, and I had a post on boundaries, that's really important to recognize, is that when we are putting up walls and boundaries saying, I'm going to keep out this behavior, that is always done because you are trying, the intention, the belief is that you are keeping out behavior that you don't want. When that is done, that is always done in most cases based on a trauma or a trigger. You don't like it, it made you feel bad, you want to keep out things that make you feel bad. And so you judge good and bad experiences on a preconceived notion on what they're actually teaching you. If you understand that when I feel bad, and for me personally, when I feel bad, I don't judge it as a bad feeling. I don't judge my good feelings as a good feeling. I don't have any of that judgment that exists on any of the spectrums of my emotions. Okay, I have this energy that's arising from these different experiences that are coming up, and I translate the energy directly for what it is without imprinting a preference over the top of that. And so when we look at the way that we hold boundaries and we say, oh, you can't interact with me that way, what you're actually doing is bypassing the personal responsibility in your own energy that has output through that person and been carried back to you. And so we need to look at a lot of layers of things that tend to show up through the way that we have those kinds of interactions. And that's part of why relationships are so challenging, because they are a constant feedback mechanism of all of those different programs that we run from our childhood, from our life experiences. And we continue to have those beliefs held in us that continue to repeat that over and over. And then you have the new age teachings that come out that say, okay, it's time to hold boundaries with your partners and hold boundaries with your family. And that ends up turning into a spiritual bypass where you're not actually holding yourself accountable to your role in co-creating that dynamic with the person. And so I've had a couple of clients mention their relationships with their parents and things that have been evolving over the last couple of months, especially. And what ends up happening is when we look at our parents, maybe we live with our parents or we live close to our parents and we have certain interactions that end up happening. We see them behaving in their own, where our consciousness is expanding maybe, and we're doing our healing work and we're trying to, and we see them not necessarily healing. We see them in old behaviors that may not be empowering. And our desire is to say, well, I've been healing and I've been feeling more and more empowered. I would love for that to be, I would love to also share that with you so that you can have that same experience of empowerment, and we can have a better relationship within that. The important aspect of, nope, that's good. That just disappeared. That was funny. So the important aspect of our relationship with our parents is to recognize that everyone on this planet has the same experience in terms of the learning algorithms that they're needing to go through. If you have a parent that is sick, it's not your job to constantly rescue the parent from their experience, from their illness, whether that's just by teaching them, whether that's by giving them reframes on all these things. It's up to them in their inner intelligence to guide them to those shifts in belief, to realize if they are ill all the time, they have a belief in illness. They have a worthiness program or an unworthiness program that exists within them that is literally communicating through their cellular consciousness and being manifested. At the same time, there's always an energetic pull within the cellular structure that is meant to create a polarization towards health. So when you are unhealthy and you have the belief that your body is unhealthy and you're trying to be fixed by external means in that sense, the thing that the doctor ends up doing is that you believe what the doctor is delivering to you will create health. And because you have that belief, health is created. And so the thing you can skip there is to recognize your co-creation within that and begin to shift your own beliefs around what your body is capable of, and understand that it is only shown up in the way that it has because of the beliefs that you hold. And there is a window of time that it takes for those things to start to shift. So if I say, okay, I'm healthy, and you give yourself a positive affirmation, you're not acknowledging the negative side. You're also not giving it the time to continue to unfold, to reinforce that belief and energy in the cells, so that as they reincarnate, the old beliefs begin to shift and change and re-empower themselves. And that's the same thing when we interact with our family members and our parents, that we cannot possibly tell them anything that is going to get them to change their mind. What we can do is we can show up embodied in our in our newer belief structures, in our empowerment, in the way that we choose to interact and be loving in spite of their programs. And we can choose to have the personal responsibility to see their underlying desires, right? If we have a parent who we immediately reject because they're not thinking the way that you think, because you're higher consciousness and they should level up and they should think in that way, then you're also not holding the personal responsibility for seeing their underlying beliefs, their underlying desires, their underlying experience, and not necessarily validating it, but understanding what is their underlying desire. When they are talking about not liking the way their body looks, or they don't like the way that their health is unfolding, they are desiring a subtext that is different from the words that they are using. And so when you can trace the words that they're using to an underlying desire for an emotional or thought experience, you can begin to see that in them. And instead of arguing truth versus truth, when both of them are true, you can start to guide them towards the experience they actually desire. So if you have a parent who's always complaining about their body image, you can recognize in them that they want to love the way their body looks. They want to love the way their body feels. They want to feel unrestricted in their body. But if you immediately say, Oh, you don't like the way your body looks? Oh, your body looks great. You didn't hear the subtext of the energy that they are currently in. And so they will immediately put their guard up because you're conflicting a belief that they hold. And so your work there is in bridging the gap between knowing, okay, their desire wants to be here and their belief is over here. How can I have them look at their negative belief in this sense that's causing this polarization, so that you can help them reframe the negative aspect of it, realizing, okay, well, if you have this belief that your body is XYZ, well, what would happen if you trusted your body's consciousness? What if you realize that your beliefs literally create your physiology and the way that you think about food and what that food does to your body, and the nutrients or anti-nutrients that you eat and what those do to your body, and the toxins and what the toxins in the air do to your body, and what the risks of all these different things are, and you're holding all these risks and all these fears? Well, what imprint is that going to give to your cellular consciousness? Well, what happens if you start to understand, at least on a distant fundamental level, that, well, if my beliefs are creating all these other things, it must also create my body. It must also collectively create the collective awareness. Can I start to say, you know what, I don't know exactly how this can unfold. I don't know if I can just will my body to be ripped and shredded and feel great. But I also realize that I have spent a long time believing in pain and believing in illness and having this belief that an external doctor or somebody needs to fix what I'm feeling. And then you continue to reinforce those beliefs through those experiences. Well, can I give it a chance to do something different? Can I say, you know what, I have held those beliefs and they've definitely proven true. Well, what happens if I say, you know what, I see that these prove true, not because I believe this, but because my beliefs created this experience? Well, then I can say, well, what other experience can my belief create? Can I start to say, you know, not just say, well, I'm feeling unrestricted now, right? Or I'm feeling better in my body, or I'm loving my body. Well, you immediately create the oppositional belief when you do that. So what you want to start doing is, well, one, do that and then recognize the oppositional belief. But then you start to say, what would happen if I gave myself permission to hold both of those opportunities? I can believe that I have created this negative side of the game. I can also believe that my energy created the positive side of the game. Can I, just little by little, start to pour energy into this other side and see what happens? Not so much to say I'm lying to myself, but just literally at the simplest way to say, if my belief can create illness, my belief can create health. And you start to say, I'm going to start trying to believe what health means to me. And you start defining, what is health to me anyway? What does it mean to be healthy? Does it mean to not have pain? Does it mean to have energy throughout the day? Does it mean that when you go to do a certain movement, your body doesn't feel restricted? What does health mean? Does it mean you have mental clarity? Does it mean you have emotional harmonization and not dysregulation in your hormonal system? And so start to define what that health is so that you could define what unhealth is. And through doing that, you'll begin to see where your conflicting beliefs are around what you're defining health is. Or maybe you haven't even defined what health is, which is why you haven't been able to reach that. And so you can start to define both aspects in a greater deal and say, well, I'm seeing these other opposing beliefs that have proved true, and I'm starting to see these start to prove themselves true. And I can start to say, well, how can I shift the spectrum over to this to give this an opportunity to start to flourish? And all of this stuff, we live in a mind-generated reality, right? Our mind is constantly creating action. It's constantly creating opportunities for us to learn these things. And it always starts in the mind, whether it's this level of our brain cognition or it's the higher aspects of our mind that create through our physiology and our nervous system and all these different things. We can start to recognize that these programs were imprinted on us to give us a certain type of disempowerment, that it is our personal work to shift. It is our personal work to cultivate. What does health mean to us? What does it mean to have a body that feels unrestricted? Do I believe in injury? Now, when I believe in that injury, do I hold on to the fear of what that injury is? What does that injury inhibit? Can I start to shift how that injury affects my physiology just by shifting what I believe that injury is doing to me and what weakness it's creating? And over time, allow that to shift my experience of what that limitation is that's created from that injury. And one that can help you heal a whole lot faster. But it also helps you to understand the co-creative elements of what happens when our physiology is changing, when we are injured, what we believe around what our injury means about who we are, and how we can show up and what we can do. And when you start to see that, you start to say, oh, I have been hesitating to hold on to something in this way because I'm afraid of having that injury come back, or I'm afraid of weakness in this area. And can I start to recognize where those things are imprinted so that I can start to shift the underlying energies that might not be flowing through those areas of my body just as a result of me holding that stasis or that belief in rigidity. And as we kind of start to get into, like next week, we start to talk about the organ systems, and we start to talk about how these belief structures and these programs and these traumas result in certain emotional states, and they translate to certain dysregulations, and how this particular organ ties into these other organs energetically, and how they came about from embryology, and how the nervous system ties into some of these things. We can start to see, oh, when I had that belief for a long time and I had that injury, and that injury changed what I believed the function was, and that function changed how the energy flowed and the lymphatic system flowed through that area. And that change in lymphatic flow dehydrated the tissues, and that change in dehydration caused a crystallization in the fascial structure, and that dehydration in the fascial structure changed how the piezoelectric impulses sent electrical signals through my body, and that creates a rigid stasis that generates an oppositional electrical energy or noise in our electrical circuit. And so if we can understand how these layers all fit together, and we can start to say, well, it's important to have people at every single layer doing the different pieces of that puzzle. So you don't necessarily need to be somebody who solves all of the breadth of problems, but if you're aware all of these problems are connected and they're multi-layered and they're multi-dimensional, you can see, oh, well, I can come from the outside and that'll loop through, and I can come from the inside and that'll loop out. And you can start to see how all of these things are constantly co-creating each other simultaneously in real time, and begin to really quickly cultivate change within your body and within your mindset and within the reality that you're creating, just by understanding how those things all get stuck and all those things flow through us. Okay. What other stuff did that bring up for you guys? Any of my coaching clients that had something?
Right, I had a question. Oh, go ahead, Lucy.
Okay. So just before this session, actually, I went to see my parents, and it brought up something for me. Basically, I was going to their house to pick up some pillows, and before I got there, I held the belief that my mum would switch the new pillows, my pillows, for her pillows, and lo and behold, she did do that. So, she said to me, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Did you switch the pillows?" And she said, "No." And so I said, "Well, you did, because I can see." And then she admitted, after saying no, that she did. Now, I always used to kind of resent her for lying, and I always wanted her to apologize. And when this happened, I wasn't angry at her, but a part of me, I wasn't angry with her, and I was impressed with how I chose to handle it. But then also I asked her to apologize to me, and then on my way home I realized part of me wanted her to say sorry, and I didn't need her to say sorry, but I still asked. So it was kind of like, well, I had the opportunity to choose better, but I didn't, because I still asked her to apologize to me. And it was like my child self wanted her to acknowledge what she had done and how she had made me feel when she lied. So that was just really interesting, because considering what we all spoke about yesterday, and how, me and my mum have had like a super great relationship since I've been doing healing work. So it's just really interesting that that came up just before this session.
Absolutely. I think so. It's not wrong to ask for your needs to be met, right? And so we want to understand the two layers of what that is. That, you know, you knew this and you still asked for it doesn't mean that you necessarily made you had a higher consciousness choice and you needed to operate from a higher consciousness now that you know better. That's not necessarily, like, that's true if you believe that's true, but it doesn't need to be the only truth. And so when we look at what those energies are, we can start to see how your consciousness was projected back through your mother because of the belief and expectation you held around what her behavior has been historically, right? You've known that she has lied to you in the past. You knew that she could potentially lie about something, and you set up the energetic co-creation with that belief that was fulfilled through her response to you in first switching the pillows and then not being in her integrity about it. At the same time, you have also beliefs around what it means to be in your integrity, how important it is to be authentic, how important it is to be honest. And so those potential beliefs are areas where you judge yourself for where you might not be honest, for where you might have hidden something in a way that, or swapped something in a way, or not asked for something when you should have. And that can give you an idea of, okay, I judge inauthenticity, or I judge this type of integrity. Where in my own life do I do the same thing? Do I do that same thing to others, or do I do that to her? Or do I think about certain things? Or am I triggered by people who talk in this certain way? And can I recognize that I do something similar, or I want to do something and don't give myself permission to do it, right? Because a lot of times it's like somebody is showing up in a way that we really want to show up as, and we're not doing it. And so we choose something to be triggered by the way that when we start judging the way that they talk, or the things that they share, or the things that are coming up, just as a catalyst to help us recognize, wait, I'm actually really only upset about the things that they're sharing, and they're not being completely honest in what they're sharing, because actually I wish I could share openly and have the success and the turnover and the things that come from just being able to share and show up, recognizing that there actually is no truth. Every stage of the game has this truth, and then a higher truth that holds both. And then that has this truth, and a higher truth that holds all of those. And so it just keeps expanding out in that sense. And the more we can recognize, the things that we're judging through that interaction, the things that we judge within ourselves, or the things that we desire that we aren't actually giving to ourselves or performing, that can give us a lot of indicators on how we can start to shift our perspective of that. At the same time, it gives you an opportunity to see your mom's desires and your mom's thought process and reasoning. If she lied to you, it means she holds a belief, she has a shame, and she holds a belief in guilt, and she holds a belief in right and wrong, and she holds a belief in all of these different things that are true to her, and that she has believed in consequences as a result of what that means. And alongside that, she also has desires that she's trying to fulfill through the expression of that particular interaction. And so that shows up both because you had a preference and that she had a underlying desire that she acted on, and then the conflict between your beliefs and her co-creation of that with you created the outcome that you experienced as a mechanism to show you where those underlying distortions are in how you're interacting still, right? And so part of that process is like, yeah, my relationship is getting better, and now I'm learning to speak up to have my needs met, or I'm learning to speak up so that my so that I don't just say, well, I can handle it if she said things or did things that I actually thought were not respectful of the agreements that we hold, right? If those were mine and that was our agreement that this belonged to me, and she took it from you, that violates that particular agreement. And you can understand that, well, it's actually okay for me to have a layer of aggression in this interaction that says I need to actually hold that particular interaction accountable to the agreement that we had, while also taking personal responsibility for my co-creation with Erich, right? So there's a way that you can project and say, you should have done this better, and you shouldn't be lying to me, and you should. Or you can say, I see how I co-created this. I see how this interaction happened. I saw the thoughts that I had leading up to it, and I can see how that showed up in the way that my reality projected. Now, how can I take responsibility for this while also saying, I prefer that you not lie to me? How do I do that? Well, I can say, well, she lied because she was afraid. She lied because she had these other beliefs. And I was like, well, I see that you switched the pillows out, and that was not nice of you, whatever way you want to talk to your mom. And I see that you lied, and I prefer that I see that you lied because you're afraid of altercation in someone. You're afraid of confrontation, whatever it is that she was afraid of. Be like, look, I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not mad at you for any of this stuff. I'm not feeling a pain around it. I just noticed it, and I thought it was not respectful of, my things, and it just didn't feel good to me that you did that. And so then you can start to see, well, she's afraid. How can I make her less afraid to communicate with me? How can I create a safe space where I can still speak up about something that really was not in integrity, while still holding my personal accountability and seeing my mother in her own story? That requires a tremendous amount of awareness. That's not an easy thing to do, right? That's a real-time, high bandwidth experience that you need to be reading a lot of things between the lines in real time. So it's not an easy thing. I don't want you to think that like one of these is right and one of these is wrong. It's a learning experience that now you're like, okay, there is more things that I could have held in my awareness when I did this. I will see what happens as I get more opportunities to see how my beliefs unfold. And now I can hold more data and then interact with that in that way. Was that helpful?
Yeah, that was really helpful. It was interesting that if this had happened maybe before, I would have held so much resentment, and I would have just, thought about it all day long. But it didn't even kind of, there was, my sense of calm wasn't disturbed. It was just like, it was positive, but it was just really interesting. So yeah, really helpful. Thanks.
Exactly that.
So
Dave?
good to notice that. That's awesome.
Yeah, I had a question kind of going back to the discussion of quote unquote action. And I'm not sure that I have a great way of phrasing this, but I'll just trust what comes out here. So, yeah, I was thinking, I'm trying to understand what the role is of like tangible things, like moving my arm, speaking, making a Facebook post or whatever, Instagram post. I was thinking yesterday, like a lot, the belief talk last week kind of shook up all my belief structures. And so this whole week, I've just been kind of like seeing beliefs and then questioning them and just kind of pushing them. But eventually I got into this like weird zone where there were so many questions that I was like, I don't know how to act. And there were actually some beliefs there that I was able to see. And so that was, so it continues. But one thing I was thinking about was, let's say I have the desire to have a person call me and set up a coaching session, let's say. I was in the context of like questioning beliefs. I was thinking about, well, how does that materialize? I could say, well, the way this happens is I create an Instagram account and I post all this content and people see me as someone to learn from. And then I put out a call for coaching and they contact me. Like that is a way this could happen. But theoretically also, like maybe I could hold this belief that someone wakes up in the morning, looks at their life and says, I don't like this, picks up their phone, somehow calls my number and says, I want coaching. Like that, I think could happen. Like if I want to like really question beliefs and push stuff, like why not, right? But then I got into this weird place of then, okay, like what's the point of acting, or like how do I engage with these kind of like all these different scenarios around like 3D reality, so to speak. Does that make sense?
So because we have so many imprints from convention that says work a 9 to 5, earn your income. If you're not working enough, you're not worthy of making money. You're not worthy of having clients, or if you're having leisure time, you're unworthy. Therefore, you're not going to make any money. And so there's elements of beliefs that have a ton of tendrils tied to unworthiness in terms of what happens when we take action versus not. At the most fundamental level, our beliefs will create that opportunity for us without us needing to post and like have a quota, right? Because usually we don't know what that imaginary quota is of output that's going to magically have that show up for us. And the reason for that is because there's so many nuanced beliefs tied to how that operates that like you're not realistically going to be able to, okay, just sit here doing nothing for the next year, fix those beliefs and just have it work. Because part of that game is fixing some things that you thought were it, trying it now and realizing, oh wait, there's more nuance that I needed to shift and more nuance that I needed to balance a little bit better so that when I continue outputting, I'm getting the response from the universe that I want. Like for me, when I first started doing, my movement programs, my hip mobility stuff, and started movement coaching, I had just been sharing I was sharing what I did. You know, I was just doing my workouts and weird exercises and talking about my logic behind what I was doing. And I had never even asked or offered coaching. And people started to then ask, hey, do you offer coaching? It wasn't because it was even necessarily on my radar. And then somebody asked, and I was like, oh, I actually could offer coaching. And then I started to pursue something of that nature. Now, that may not unfold in that way for you, and it definitely doesn't unfold that way for me anymore, not in the same context. And so there's always different layers of, let's say, action and response that we use as a tool to see where our beliefs are not allowing that action to create the response that we want. It doesn't mean that we need action to create the response. It means that we use action for feedback to tell us where those things are out of alignment. And initially, and in a lot of cases, it can take a lot of action and testing and processing and self-awareness and all these different things that come about before the action and response is faster and clearer in terms of the alignment of what we're actually trying to create. And that has weavings in our worthiness, that has weavings in what we have programmed growing up in terms of value of our work ethic. And then we start to dig in, well, am I not worthy if I have leisure time? Am I not worthy if, what am I afraid of? What am I afraid my identity is if I have leisure time or if I'm not working 24/7? What am I afraid my identity is if I, or where do I think my identity or my life will go if I have leisure time, and what is the reality of that? And so I was talking to Anastasia a little bit about this yesterday. Did you want to share a little bit about what came up from that, or do you
About
sure
having
about
leisure?
work? Yeah, leisure in general, and then I'll reframe it.
Sure. We were talking, okay, so I have a belief that something about too much leisure will lead to stagnation. I'm having a brain fart, so
That's okay. So when we have a belief that too much leisure will lead to stagnation, that becomes true for you, right? And then all of the things that you do end up being like, well, I would just like a break. I would just like to relax, because what you're not asking for a break. You're asking to pour your energy in a slightly different direction, but you don't give yourself permission to have those experiences. So when you actually have that experience, you judge yourself and your consciousness is not actually in it. It's doing other things. And so we don't need to be working all the time necessarily to earn a right to have leisure. We want to understand the beliefs that exist around that. And we want to understand that our consciousness works in rhythms. And the more we can follow those rhythms and realize, well, I'm down regulated at this point, and my if you're feeling tired, you can either keep saying, I feel tired, and energize the fatigue. Or you can say, okay, I feel tired now. I need to refocus my energy and say, now I can give my body rest. I can give my body a recharging experience, whatever that means. And just refocusing into the recharging solution of it can allow that energy to come back. And it can allow you then to have the leisure experience that you want. So we want to look at when we are desiring leisure and we have beliefs around what that, what leisure means for our identity. A lot of times we think that if I have leisure, I'm not worthy and I'm going to betray the people around me in some way. Or if I have too much leisure, I won't make money. And so when I was talking to Anastasia yesterday, I was like, well, did you need to so she teaches at an art studio.
Yep.
So she teaches at an art studio. And so I asked her, I was like, well, do you have any control on when you get called to teach a class, or do you just get called randomly to teach the classes? Do you have any say in that? And do you have any control over that? Or does that just show up? So does your fact that you are busy change whether a class shows up? And does you having leisure cause you to say no to that class because you're being lazy? And so we have to start to track what that actually means when we have leisure and what we think it's going to create in our life and whether that's actually real, right? If her income is created from her art studio, then her having leisure at home in between classes doesn't change whether those clients show up, doesn't change whether she makes money, doesn't change whether she's worthy or not, but she has tied the two together. And if you tied the two together, your experience of it is that they are tied together in that sense. And so we want to then notice where those things are tied together so that when you recognize the desire for permission to enjoy leisure and to relax, or to do whatever those other things are that you want to do, that we have to analyze the things that we believe would happen if we have that leisure time, if we're not acting, right? So for Dave, if you feel like the times where you're not taking action, you don't make money, well, we have to understand, what does it mean? Like, what is the reality of that, for one? If you don't take action, have you had clients show up out of nowhere without you pitching it to ask you to do things? Yes or no? And if you haven't, then we need to understand what you did to get those clients in, and then what energy you embodied when those clients showed up. At the same time, we want to understand, if you have had that, what is the belief that you have about the action that you take that causes the experience that you judge to also surface. And so if you judge what leisure means, or what happens when you have leisure, maybe you run out of money, or you won't be able to pay your bills, or people who count on you will be betrayed because of XYZ. And so you can look into the stories that you believe on account of who you're supposed to be. Like, if you're supposed to show up in this specific way, and that would cause you not to show up in this way, so you can't do it. If you are somebody who usually is the teacher and the intelligent one who knows all the stuff that's coming up, and suddenly you're in a time where you need support, where you're like, well, if I need support, then how am I supposed to also hold this identity as being the teacher, as being this guide, as being the person who is intelligent? And so you end up actually blocking the flow of information through you, right? Because a lot of times, if you recognize that you are always connected and that the information that you need is always available when you need it, but you believe that it's not always available, or that you need to search for it, you created a block to that energy being able to come up and be available to you. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that way. So part of that shift is to recognize all of those different layers of nuance, so that when you aren't working, you realize, oh, wait, I wanted leisure today, but as soon as I went out to walk in the park, I was like, well, should I be at home working? Should I be at home building this thing? Should I be working to build this thing? Because if I don't, I won't make money. Well, now you just revealed a whole bunch of beliefs that you hold around just from that thought process that you had, and the judgments that you had about what you're doing, rather than doing what you're doing and allowing these things to be created through you. And so that gives you then that opportunity to reframe a whole boatload of beliefs and dig into them and what they mean for you and see where that leads you, right? It's never going to be this one light switch that flicks that says, okay, now I can have leisure, or now I'm making all this money, or now I have the perfect relationship. It's peeling of those layers of saying, okay, I took this action or I did this thing and I recognize I hesitated, or I recognize this was really easy, or I recognize that this created an underlying self-talk or pain or whatever that came up from what I was doing and where I was judging myself. Well, that's really important information that you can then use to say, okay, I'm seeing this behavior, I'm seeing this thought process. What is the belief that underlies it? Can I start to shift that into more empowerment, saying, well, I don't have control of this, even though I believe that that's the case. How can I shift that belief into something that I am more empowered in thinking, and practice thinking that, and practice looking in that direction proactively while doing what you're doing, and then also shifting and holding yourself accountable to what's happening, right? Because if you still hold the belief that you need to work to make money, and you're saying, well, I also want to hold the belief where I don't have to work to make money, well, you need to recognize both still exist and both will be created simultaneously depending on the energetic weight that each of them still hold. So initially, you need to work to make money until this starts to prove itself more and more, until you're like, well, right now I have to work to make money, so I'm supported. But I also am creating the belief that I don't have to work. I am supported whether I'm creating and creating and creating all the time, and allow that to show up separate from you working to make money. So it proves itself to your belief system, right? You could be working and making money and now suddenly things pop out of the left field, right? Those things start to show up and you're like, wait, this stuff is showing up because I created this belief and I shifted these things and now they're supporting me in this way. And I can start to, okay, now I can shift over here and I can start to create a different atmosphere.
That's really helpful. Yeah, and I can see kind of how that shows up. It sounds like action is just or quote unquote action, whatever that looks like, whether it's sitting or whether it's posting on Instagram or whatever it might be. Action is just the kind of output of the energy that you're living in, or whatever, like, I don't want to say level, but like, well, yeah, it's part of like the whole feedback loop, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's it. It's all a feedback loop. It's all like you're constantly getting feedback, and there is never a time where you won't get feedback, whether that's positive feedback or negative feedback or neutral feedback that's just feedback, right? You know, you're the one who judges whether it's positive or negative feedback. So all the time you're going to get feedback because it's meant to help you have more awareness of what you are embodying and what you believe and what programs you hold and how they interact with the world around you. And our work is literally in getting to the more and more nuanced levels of disbelief that prevent you from having the powerful expressions of things that you actually want to be able to express.
I think there's an extra piece of that question that I sense you were asking is, because I had the same thing, is there was a time where I was only working on my energy and only working on energetic homeostasis within my being, right? But I wasn't taking the physical actions in the world and then wondering, why isn't this showing up? Why isn't this showing up? I did like 4 hours of energy practice today. I did too, and I just like got stuck in that. So can you speak to that? Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like, is there any of that in what you were asking? Like what the actual physical, what's the role of physical action in that?
Yeah, so there's a couple of layers of when we let's say that we were told that we can just meditate and that meditation will both bring us the information and create the reality that we want to create. And at the same time, our personal experience has said, well, I've had a lot of experiences that have not just magically showed up in heaven, right? And so you have both a conflicting belief and a wishful thinking that exists simultaneously. And so you're trying to, through that, by saying, okay, I'm going to will this into action, or I'm going to do this work. And you believe that doing this work is you just sitting and cultivating this energy, or journaling, or doing only self-reflection. So you're like, I had 20 pages of journal notes on self-reflection, all these things that I think, and all these things that I think I should be doing, and all these things that could be better, and all these things that I desire, and all the beliefs that I hold. But you leave it on the page. And you don't then look at the steps, whether that's energetic steps in terms of I'm going to embody the new being that allows those things to be expressed through me, or you don't take the action steps in terms of physical action that create it, right? So one of the things that we want to realize is that when we have an idea, that idea is an energy reality that exists in a probability field. If all we do is journal and realize, we're creating a ton of ideas in probability fields around us. But if we don't energetically take action, or we don't physically take an action, we're not actually aligning with any of those probability fields and stepping towards them, right? The thing we want to realize is that we exist in physical body in a time matrix that has linear time. And so even though these things exist simultaneously in multiple fields, and they're created in our past and in our future, and we align with them, we want to recognize that when we have a manifestation or an idea, the reason that we don't get to it or it doesn't happen is because we have to create it in our future. That future point and idea then gives us the actions or embodiment that we need to have in order to align with what that is, or step into that level of consciousness where that shows up for us. And so they are a co-creation in a lot of ways. And so eventually your step through consciousness naturally aligns with this thing that you've created, and you more accurately, every time you create it, you're just aligned with it because you're more precise in the way that you think, and more precise in the way that you create ideas, and the more precise in your imagination, and how your imagination directs willpower, and how the imagination and willpower gives this idea substance more and more form, and how your action then walks you towards something that has a lot more substance. And so these are all multi-layered, right? Everybody wants to either have leisure and just have it happen. Okay, I'm just going to sit here and allow. And if I just sit here and allow, if you remember that light bulb analogy, if I'm just bringing this stuff back and building this pot of gold here, I'm not actually illuminating the bulb, which is the manifestation object or experience that I'm trying to create. And so we need to understand how the output and the input can co-create that by us aligning with that trajectory. If I want to be a billionaire businessman or bring in $1 million and I want to sit there and do nothing, well, I have beliefs around whether I'm worthy of winning the lottery, but if there's also this idea that, okay, what does it mean to have make this much money in a business? What would it take in terms of sales or clients or energy commitments? And you start to then say, okay, I see what that's going to take in terms of work. I see what that's going to take in terms of action. And then as you start taking action to align with this, then you refine the superfluous elements of that belief that withhold your acceleration towards that. Right? But you have to start based on where your beliefs are now so that you can take action based on your current beliefs and allow the action towards that thing you're creating to shed the layers that withhold the momentum you want to create towards it.
That's really helpful. And thanks, Annie. That was the question behind the question.
I see you.
All right. So if any of you guys had another question, coaching clients had another question, you're welcome to ask it real quick. I didn't see quite what that, orange juice. Yeah, I didn't get my orange juice today. We're out of orange juice because we came back from Ohio.
Out of town.
We were
so
just visiting my
instead,
parents.
we have a honey squeezy.
That I didn't use. I'm running out of batteries. But yeah, if my coaching clients have a question real quick, I'll answer one more and then we will call it a day. And next week we will get into some of the other nitty-gritty details of how these things are going to connect. And I'll teach you some new color puncture treatments, which I think you guys will like. And one of the things that we will see from the way I'll teach it is I'm actually just going to teach you how to find the points and how to do the treatments. And then my coaching clients or members of the archive will get the imagery that they need to follow for doing those treatments. So that'll be kind of separated that way to, because there's a lot of work there. involved in putting that all together. So anything else? Anything else?
I know plenty came up this week.
All right. So going back to the appreciation that you mentioned, like you should be appreciative. So I know I brought that up because my parents seem to want me to show appreciation because what they've seen or what they interpreted was a lack of appreciation and kind of a like a harsher judgment of them. So I just wonder if you could expand on that, because I know that I shouldn't necessarily like have to be appreciative, or it's not that I need to be appreciative.
So
And that
all of that is true. And that's where your own, like, what is the higher experience you want to have? If you recognize that your parents maybe aren't doing this work yet, or aren't very far along in it, or any of these concepts, and they're still operating in the old program that, that you should honor your parents in this specific way, and you should be appreciative, and they need the verbalization of appreciation because they are not yet holding their own integrity in terms of that understanding yet. You can either say, well, I don't need to give it to them, which is true, or I could give it to them and create a better relationship through that. Because it might also be that your resistance to giving appreciation is because you don't appreciate yourself. You don't appreciate your own worth. You don't appreciate the things that you know and that you are doing for other people. And so it becomes very hard for you to appreciate your family or appreciate these other things, because the standard you set for what earns appreciation is both imaginary and higher than what is been an experience that you've had. And so part of that is understanding what is worthy of appreciation, and how can you appreciate yourself, and how can you appreciate how things unfold, and how can you learn to trust how that works, and how can you then also see the desire behind your parents' desire for appreciation. Are they feeling the same insecurities that you feel when you work on your clients, that you want the validation from your clients to say, this was really awesome, you did exactly what needed to be done. And so your parents are saying, I loved you in this way, and I need confirmation that you feel loved. And so then you appreciate them in response. And so they're mirroring back to you those same programs that you run with your clients. And so as you start to trust yourself, your parents won't crave appreciation from you because you're not projecting that way. At the same time, the more you give that to your parents, the more you also can start to give that to yourself. And you can start to then reframe a lot of those underlying beliefs and structures, so that you're not saying, well, I'm withholding appreciation because I think they should give it to themselves. You're never withholding. You're always give it. They want it. I'm going to give this to them because I love my parents. Or, I see that they have this desire, and my bigger desire is not to be right. My bigger desire is to have a loving relationship where my parents are fun to be around, and they're miserable when they don't feel appreciated. Right. And so that is where we start to get into the nuance. And then also figuring out what kind of appreciation do they actually want? Is it just saying thank you? Or is it something more involved than that, and helping yourself define it, and helping all of these different layers just by you interacting in that sense and being aware of it, right? Because you're doing this work, and because you hold that consciousness that is aware of these interactions, you hold a higher personal responsibility because you're aware of it. So if you're aware of these things and you ignore them, it's still going to affect you just as much as if you're aware of it. And it's only hurting you to not navigate knowing what you know, right? It's not that you're doing something wrong. It's that this personal responsibility is because these things exist. You see these other underlying psychic realities between these other people. And if you ignore them, it's like having a research paper and only using the first paragraph from it to pitch your entire presentation, right? And so you want to understand that there's a lot of information here that we need to read from, that we need to interact with, and that nothing is right. It's just giving us an opportunity to find balance on these different spectrums and how we want to interact and how we want our reality created and how we want to be treated.
Yeah, awesome. And just from what Scott said, it brought up the idea that we might be speaking a different language of appreciation too. Like I show it through trying to help them like physically and mentally like work through stuff through their pains, but they want it, maybe they think appreciation is like a verbal, like a thank you for everything they've done for me. So I can just change my appreciation or give them the form that they understand better or that they want more.
So I'll read what Scott said so you guys can hear it. He said, think about the form of appreciation you would like to receive, and how you can provide that too. You might believe in verbal appreciation because it may feel, you may not believe in verbal appreciation because it may feel false or forced. But you can explain to them the ways in which you do show appreciation. I'm not reading well today. But can you explain to them the ways in which you show appreciation, or the ways in which you do appreciate them? We can find appreciation in anyone, even just as the mirror they provide for us. And so all that is 100% agree with that. And so, like I said, it's always nuanced, right? We have one word definitions for a lot of things where the word really is a limiting factor for the gestalt of what those things hold. And so the more we can understand that we've labeled a lot of things in our reality, and those labels actually are the limiting factor, and we can let go of the label and understand the energies that have a wider breadth than that label can be given, we can really start to shift some really fundamental things and empower ourselves in a much better way. Okay, so that's good for today. We got 2 hours at this point. We'll keep building onto it over the course of the week. And I'm still working on kind of evolving how all this stuff is going to work. Like I said, we've built some things for the a la carte sessions, and we're going to keep building that out. So there's some of these a la carte sessions that if you're interested in watching the recordings after the fact without necessarily needing to subscribe to the whole archive, you can buy the individual sessions. And that's available. So you can just DM me at this point to do that. And I'll send you the link. And that will evolve a little bit as well. So there's a whole bunch of other insights and things that are coming up that I'm still evolving. So we'll see how all this stuff starts to manifest and show up and all the programs I need to work on to figure out how that's going to work in the right way. So I will talk to you guys next week. So thanks everybody for coming on.